Good evening, gamers. I had a great time at Destiny for the entire year of Final Shape. For me, the main thing that really pushed the game further and evolved the Sandbox, besides of course Prismatic, was the variety of new weapons and changes we saw surrounding our guns and how they all connected to the overall build crafting landscape of the game. Over this last year, we saw more weapon frames that drastically change up existing builds or sometimes straight up add brand new playstyles. We had revamps of subclasses that connected our abilities and weapons more than ever, and with Edge of Fate it looks like Bungie's only ramping that up further, and I'm just itching to get my hands on all the new loot. So today, before we all get into the last stages of expansion prep, I want to talk about what Sandbox changes I thought were the most impactful during Final Shape. For the scope of the video, we're going to focus on weapons and what has been the most significant for me as an experienced player. Quick note, we just hit 1,000 subscribers recently, and I did not expect to get there so quickly at all. I really can't wait to see where we go from here as a growing community. Y'all have been awesome to me so far, so let's just keep the ball rolling and talk about the best things Bungie did to weapons this year. Let's start with support frames being added. Ever since I saw our first support frame in No Hesitation, I was in love. Before Final Shape, I had always wanted to see more specialized roles during harder content rather than what we've had, where every character and class kind of felt like an omni tool where they were good or decent at kind of everything. But with the introduction of things like Unbreakable and Titan Barricades, we got Titans a bit closer to that traditional MMO tank role, and I'm all for it. Now that we have support frames, they enable very viable support roles, especially on Warlock with Speaker's Sight. We already have some decent variety with just the two support frames we have, Adamantite being in the kinetic slot with strand perks to debuff enemies while still having decent healing output gives me some freedom of choice when building around different content. I can only imagine we're going to see more flavors of this in Edge of Fate, and that is something I'm really looking forward to. With other subclass changes coming soon, such as Solar Titan having more support capability, we're going to see a lot more support roles being used in in-game content. I really hope Bungie leans into it being a more emphasized part of team compositions. I love playing support in games like Overwatch or Final Fantasy XIV, so having that playstyle now adapted into my favorite game, I couldn't be happier with that. Best part is they're extremely strong, these support autos, but they do come with a sizable trade-off of not having a special or exotic in the slot. And that's a hard balance to strike with primaries and just general support roles. So these support frames get an A+ from me. Next up, in a gigantic departure from Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 early on, these days primaries are just not great at doing damage in harder content, and Final Shape pushed that even further. But let me tell you why that's actually a good thing for primaries. When D2 came out, we could only use double primary, and things like shotguns and snipers were exclusively in the heavy slot. We spent a lot of time just tapping red bars with hand cannons, but that clearly didn't last too long. Obviously things have changed, and as power creep has grown with each expansion, primaries lost a lot of value when weapon archetypes like trace rifles and rocket sidearms are so strong now. So this means that for a primary to be really good now, it has to be doing a lot more than just shooting a lot and proccing Rampage or Firefly or something. No, these days primaries are pretty much always going to lose the slot to specials unless it's particularly interesting on its own. In Final Shape, Bungie recognized that specials were really strong, so they kicked our primaries up a notch to compete. Perks like Attrition Orbs and Kinetic Tremors saw a lot more use, and almost all primaries now have some kind of elemental synergy that give you effects such as Volatile, Slow, or Jolt, and paired with those you'll often see an ability regen perk like Pugilist or Demolitionist. All that together means primaries are now less about getting kills and more so serving a specific function for your build. Many times that function is a battery for abilities or something supplemental to them. We've always had some amount of synergy between guns and subclasses, but now that workhorse primaries are kind of few and far between, primary weapons are in a much more interesting and engaging role than they ever have been, requiring you to really think about their application if you want to include it in your loadout. In my opinion, nearly every piece of gear should pose that kind of question to you about how it fits in your builds and combat loops rather than, this one just shoots good. Primaries being more interesting is something Bungie seems to be leaning into as well. You know, we're seeing some really cool guns coming out, such as that shotgun hand cannon frame we're getting. So I can't wait to see what else Bungie's cooking to bring Primaries back into my loadouts. You know, in my script, I was going to next talk about the subclass synergies, but I kind of covered that with Primaries, so let's look at some specials that really stood out to me this year. Bungie experimented with a wholly unique stasis sniper in Critical Anomaly from Salvation's Edge. It's the only sniper in the game to get chill clip. There are a few other guns similar to that. We have Rake Angle, Tinashes, and Liturgy also did the same. They all get chill clip, bring in some really interesting combos, but I think Arc and Void are really the biggest winners this year, with a huge buff to volatile rounds, letting it proc much more frequently. Then of course, you know, the Arc rework adding Bolt Charge to the game meant we needed Rolling Storm to, you know, synergize with that. Psychopomp is a very interesting weapon with Rolling Storm or Pugilist as options. It's really interesting having these area denials around now. I could rant about cool specials all day, but the takeaway is that Final Shape really pushed weapons and abilities to work together more commonly, and we already know it's only going to ramp up in Edge of Fate, so the weapon sandbox direction being solidified this year did a ton of work for deepening the sandbox and adding a lot of freedom to build crafting. Now let's take a look at origin traits and how they have skyrocketed in effectiveness this past year. We've seen some good ones before. Land Tank is fantastic from Season of the Chosen, and there have been a few nice ones here or there, but as a general rule, origin traits have been kind of minor perks. I think for me, the big standouts have been previously Soul Drinker and Runneth Over from VOW and Kingsfall, but we're starting to see those origin traits release in extremely powerful states now. The main two I'm thinking of would be Bray Legacy from Vesper's Host and Time Lost Magazine from Vault of Glass. Those two perks, especially Time Lost, are crazy powerful and take gear from those sources a good half step above what they would be without them. There are some others also worth mentioning, such as Splicer Surge, Cast No Shadows, and Gravity Well, all bringing up some incredibly strong buffs when incorporated into your build. I love the direction they're taking origin traits because it's just kind of meh if the trait is basically nothing, like a few of them kind of are, but these extra mini perks make each drop of them just a little bit more exciting when they're actually worth using. They're the cherry on top of some already incredibly powerful weapons. Lastly, I think it goes without saying that area denial grenade launchers are the craziest archetype we've seen in recent years. Rocket sidearms are extremely powerful, but they are more or less just another gun. Now, I'm not hating on rocket sidearms, but area denials are on another level when it comes to utility. Lost Signal was the first we got with a Warlock's Dream combo of autoloading and demo, paired with that origin trait that makes enemies explode into AoE pools and the fact that it's stasis so it even generates Dark Meter quickly on Prismatic. That grenade launcher is unquestionably a top-of-the-line weapon. Then, for some reason, Bungie said, hey, you know what? Why not make a GL that's even better with even more synergies? Surely this will be balanced. So we ended up getting the Orb Printer that is VS Velocity Baton. I don't know what happened at Bungie to allow this to release in the state it's in, but this is the most overpowered weapon I have ever seen function in an intended capacity. Attrition Orbs and Demolitionists aren't just a battery for your build. I'd liken it more to a nuclear power plant behind your build. Orbs do so much in the current sandbox, so pairing Attrition Orbs with Demo means you have all of these at once. You get Ad Clear, swap loadouts, insane ability regen from Demo and the Origin trait, ability regen chunks from Orbs, healing chunks from Orbs, weapon damage from surges that you get from Orbs. This thing is broken. And honestly, I would love to see a nerf for Attrition Orbs on area denials because I see no other way to balance this weapon. But who knows, Bungie devs are far more creative with the sandbox than I am, so maybe it'll end up being something I only use in certain scenarios during Edge of Fate. Either way, if you don't have the roll on this gun, you need it, and I do not say that lightly. Now I know I said the last section was the last section, but how could I talk about weapons and not tell you what my #1 favorite of the year is? That award goes to, on no uncertain terms, Unsworn from Sundered Doctrine. This trace has it all. Shoot to loot and detonator beam are a combination I would only dream of. Trace rifles already have great ammo economy, so immediately you can just use this thing like a primary that's hit scan with really long range. But pair that with shoot to loot, which does proc off of Det-Beam, you're frequently getting instant reloads, cross-map ammo pickups, AoE damage to anything surrounding your target, all with solid DPS towards orange bars. On top of that, I made sure not to mention the Sunder Doctrine origin trait in the last section because wow, it is fantastic on Unsworn specifically. It's already a great trait on its own. It lowers enemy damage output or gives the gun a slightly weaker explosive payload based on enemy health. But combined with everything else the trace is already doing on top of a 1000 RPM tick, I struggle to find reasons to take the gun off. If I can run it, I do. Pair it with Velocity Baton and you've got one of the craziest utility loadouts this franchise has ever seen. Unsworn is easily my favorite weapon of Final Shape, and Bungie has their work cut out for them if they expect me to take it off anytime soon. So those are my thoughts on Final Shape weapons, but I know I opt out of some really popular options, so if I didn't mention some nasty weapons, let me know which ones and how you're fitting them into your loadouts. As always, thank you so much for your viewership and support. I've been loving the process of getting videos out for y'all, and I have a lot more planned. So stick around the channel for my next videos. I'll see you soon.